about the work that she does, and especially that we're working on things that we really care about, both credit unions, supporting credit unions and supporting employees. So you're going to see a lot of strands today. Our sort of theme, if you like, let me go ahead and move on here, a little bit of strands. So we're talking about weaving the pieces together. So the context, we'll start with the context a little bit, get into the bulk of our conversation here in the middle, and then think about our commitment to how we achieve some of those goals that we set. So it almost goes without saying, but the context that we are in right now, all of us, in our various disparate locations, not normally where we might be seated, a few years ago exactly. But the context that we have is a little bit, I would say, tangly, if I'm going to use that metaphor. I think that's fine. So we all know that we're facing a lot of challenges in this area. The idea that COVID-19 has impacted every aspect of our lives. It cannot be over or understated. It's pretty straightforward that we all know. But we know that this sort of shows up in different aspects of our lives for each of us personally, and for the people that we work with, as well as the members that you serve as well. So that financial stress from the organizational perspective, from the personal perspective, what does work-life balance look like? Is there such a thing anymore? I like to hope that there is, but it's sort of a shift. I don't know. It's one of these kind of angles, I think. When we see that increased competition as budgets get really tight for individuals and for organizations as well too. So we see that sometimes happening, makes it look like increased competition is happening in the world around us. When you can sit at home, tap your phone, and everything just gets delivered magically to your door, your sort of normal experience goes a little bit out the window. So I don't know, is it a good thing? I think so. It's sort of magical, but it also means there's a lot of challenges and there's a lot of competition for member attention and also for employee attention as well too. I don't want to go too long on this list of challenges, but we know that it's a long list. It brings us to these questions though, which are, how can we help, right? None of us look at these challenges and think, well, that's too bad. Someone should really do something. You're on this call, you're having this conversation because you know that you are one of those people who should be doing something and can be doing something. And many of you, of course, already are. We're looking at what are the challenges that people are facing, not just that they've been facing over the past year, but the challenges about what's to come. What does it mean to return to work or return to normal? Like, what does that even mean? From a logistics perspective, from a personal perspective, your families, all of those kinds of things, let alone are people engaged in the work that they do? Sometimes I think it's enough to balance, keep your own personal life and family and everybody healthy and sane and stable, let alone all of these other sort of pieces. And here we're talking about employee engagement. Like, come on, like that's deep level stuff. But that's not a fair weather kind of thing. That's something that's important all of the time, which is why we're having this conversation today. Because we know it's not only the impact that these conversations have on our own lives as humans, it's also as employees, as employers, and as people who serve the community in which we live as well. So that impact I cannot overstate. I will give you one big number though. I promise not to spend a lot of time on numbers. I'm a humanities person myself, but I will give you one number, and this is a big number, literally just a large number on the slide, of course, too, but 70% of people say this is the most stressful year of their lives. And I don't think that is too surprising of a number to anybody who's here today. We know that there are so many of these moments that are making up our lives that are just sort of crashing down on us all at once. Angela, is that too much crashing down? You take that one? Fair enough. So there's a lot of pieces here, which brings us to our conversation today. So I'm going to turn it over to Angela. See, I get to talk about the hard stuff, and you get to talk about some more exciting things along in the middle here.
That's right. So, and those of you who are old enough to remember, Melissa and I have a very secret signal of when I'm ready to move to the next slide, since she's running the slides. Do y'all remember those film strips that you had in grade school, and it beeped when it was time to go to the next slide? So, beep. That's how she's not going to know it's time to go to the next slide. Now, we have had a lot of fun with this conversation, and we want to involve you as much as possible. This is not a monologue for either one of us. It's not even a dialogue. It's a everybody log. I don't know. All hands on deck. So we want you to share your experiences with us. I know a lot of people that are on this call today. I've heard your stories, and I'm going to share some of my stories as well. And hopefully you haven't heard them all before. And if you have, just bear with, because there'll be new ones too, I promise. So think about what we've done to create the best first impressions for our teens. This is sort of a picture of what it was like my first job out of college. First of all, I had heard the song 9 to 5. Yes, I'm old. That song was big around graduation time. So working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living. So what a shock when I got my welcome letter and they said, your hours are 8 to 5. I'm like, 8? Who in their right mind gets up at that early of an hour? Anyway, so that was my first wild hit and ride. But think about how you welcome your new staff to their new roles. In this case, I was working for a utility company, had no idea what I was doing. It was a management training program. How exciting for me. I arrive at my circa 1950s desk. That was a metal desk, very much like this one. I told Melissa earlier, this chair is fancy compared to the chair that I got, because it was like, you know what? The new kid's coming. She doesn't need the new chair. She's going to get the old cruddy one that I've got. She doesn't need the new pens. She's going to get the ones that barely write and skip and leave blotches and things. So my office had been ransacked before I even sat down, and I got sort of all the secondhand supplies. Also, new kids on the block. I'm older than new kids on the block, if that helps. I'm more of the Barry Manilow, Captain and Tennille phase. Anyway. So I sit down at my desk. No one is expecting me. They think I'm starting weeks from now. So literally the person that meets me goes, oh, you're here. Those were literally the first words out of somebody's mouth. Really? So in the chat, talk about what are the things that you're doing to make new staff feel welcome. And as you're doing that, I'm going to go beep and go to my next slide, which is really talking about my first relationship with my first boss. My first boss was on temporary assignment when I started my job. So at the utility company, in order to do cross-training, they would send someone for 2 months, 4 months, 6 months into a different division. They would lead that division and then come back to their original job with all kinds of wonderful, wondrous wonder in their heads. So my boss was not there for my interviews. She was not there when I started, and I was already working there for a good solid month before she came back. So needless to say, she didn't like me. Excellent. You give them a welcome bag. Marilyn, what's in my welcome bag? Tell us in the chat. Keep going, because your chat is not going to bother me. We need to make this a dialogue as much as possible. So sit down with my very first boss. I have no idea what it's like to work in an office environment, right? I would come to her, and let's call her Vicky, because that's her name. So I would sit down across from Vicky. I won't say her last name. And I would say, Vicky, do you have a minute? She would say, literally, she would say 60 seconds, go. And she would look at her watch. And at the end of 60 seconds, she would pick up the phone and start dialing. And I swear she was dialing somebody random, that she didn't really make a call. But to me, as a young one out of school, it was so intimidating. It was so intimidating. Now, if that happened now, somebody might be all over it on Twitter. They're certainly going to put it on Glassdoor, right? So social media has really changed our first impression opportunities for our staff. I love the ideas that are coming in, because we are making that a moment that matters for our team. So think about some of the other moments and the milestones that matter. Beep. I'm trying to go higher. Beep, beep. Because I know the film strip beep was a little bit higher.
I'm thinking like bing, like yeah, now
Bing. Oh yeah,
bing.
bing. Too bad I don't have a little. Oh, I do have a bell. I have a mini Swiss cowbell.
You're very well prepared. I knew you were well prepared, but I
have all the things. And by the way, I love me some credit union swag. I am a hoarder of all credit union swagginess. Anyway, okay, so now think about milestones that matter to your team. Your team is the one that is putting themselves out there. They are trying to, whether it's remotely or in person, be safe and yet have an impact and create a positive member experience. So it's up to us to create a positive employee experience. You've all heard the phrase, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Yeah, if your employees aren't happy, there's no way your members are going to be happy. I'm sure you've all been in the midst of someone who is getting yelled at I don't know, a high-class restaurant like Schmick-Schmonald's, right? The manager is yelling at that poor person wearing the paper hat, and then the person has to come back out from behind the French fryer and put on a smiling face and say, how can I help you? That's tough. So we need to create that experience for our employees that's going to carry forward. So here are some milestones that matter. And I want to know what other milestones. I know I've forgotten at least one on this list. So as HR, as leadership, as CEOs, we're going to try and figure out what those major milestones are, right? And there may already be processes in place for you to recognize birthdays, anniversaries, probably with the credit union, probably not personal anniversaries, right? But if they buy a new home, especially if there is financing with the credit union, maybe we'll want to recognize that. If they've got a new addition to the family, I love this picture of this family. It is not my family, full disclosure, but I just love these little girls and their little piggy tails. If there's a death in the family, if they get a promotion, we are certainly recognizing those things. I would say we also probably do a really good job at recognizing retirements, right? That's the one that as I was reviewing these slides, I was like, okay, so these are probably things that you've already gotten processed, but are there other times that we could be recognizing moments that matter for our team? Yes, that works, right? I might get addicted to it.
It works. I know. Like, I'm very interested to see what happens after this call. If you just walk around just using it, seeing
if
it
I'm going to see if it
other
works.
situations.
Yeah. It's actually a little mini cowbell from Austria from a trip I took to Germany 6 years ago. All right. So now think about some of these other moments. Kudos for outstanding service. That's fantastic. Achievement of goals. There are some great ideas. We're going to use the CASE principle. If you haven't heard of the CASE principle, it's called copy and steal everything. Because we are a cooperative movement, we are going to cooperate by looking at all these amazing ideas and stealing them. So think about some of these major milestones, and they're milestones for me as an employee, even if you don't recognize them. And that's where we've got an opportunity. Work anniversaries. We're used to celebrating the 5-year, the 10-year, the big ones, right? The 5s and the 0s. But what about their first anniversary? What about their 12th anniversary or something random? What about their golden anniversary? If you were hired on the 21st and it's your 21st anniversary with the company. When I was a kid, my golden birthday was the thing because I was born on the 10th. I was 10 years old. It was perfection to have my golden birthday when I was 10. Now, if you're born on the 30th, maybe it's not quite as special to you. Maybe it is. I don't know. But if you don't have the capacity as the leader, the CEO or HR, can you put something in process so that you're pinging the managers to say, don't forget, you've got these anniversaries coming up this month. Returning after leave. This is a big hairball. We don't know why people are on leave. We're not allowed to ask why people are on leave. But when they come back, are we celebrating their return? I was lucky enough to be on a Zoom call where it was the first time someone who had been out on medical leave had come back. I don't know why she was coming back, but everyone else knew that she had been on medical leave. And it was the first time the whole staff got to see her on the Brady Bunch grid. And the love that poured forth from everybody to this person made me tear up. Now, does that happen with your team? And what if you don't have a Zoom meeting or some other way for people to see each other? Is there a way that you're connecting people so that there's a difference between, hey, I got my knee replaced and I just laid on the couch for 6 weeks. Now I'm sitting in front of my computer. Is anybody going to notice? I don't know. So those are moments that matter. Office moves. Office moves. Why are office moves so traumatic for our staff? Why? I don't quite understand it, but they're traumatic. They are traumatic. We need to recognize that people get comfortable where they are, and not that there's anything wrong with change, but that we have to maybe treat some of our staff with a little more care and concern when it comes to these things that are major for them, like an office move. And then I would submit applying for another position. Now, here's the thing. If I'm applying for another position, it may mean a couple of different things. It may mean that I'm not happy in the job I'm doing right now and I'm getting a little antsy. That's a red flag that you want to know about, right? As HR or as a leader. It may mean that I'm perfectly happy where I am, but I think I could do this new job and it sounds like it's really cool. So that's something that you want to look for. Or it may mean that I'm one of the 64% of our staff that are disengaged at work. And I'm applying for another position, but I'm also applying for other positions outside of the credit union. So is it worth your time to call me in and have a conversation to say, I noticed that you applied for this other position? What I would say is that especially if I apply for a position and Melissa chooses not to hire me, somebody should have a conversation with me. Whether it's Melissa, the hiring manager, whether it's my own manager, whether it's somebody else, having a conversation with that person will be able to help you identify which of those three scenarios. Are they really happy in what they're doing and they just wanted to go further? Are they not so happy and looking for another opportunity? Or are they looking for something completely different and just want out? We need to make sure that we're using that as a conversation and a touch point, and that is a moment that matters.
And I should say, anybody who chooses not to hire Angela, like, we should have a conversation with them, right? That's a bad decision all around.
Nancy, yes, we are absolutely remiss if we don't coach for an upcoming interview. I have unfortunately had encounters with so many staff that have come to me and said, I'm really afraid to tell my boss that I'm going to apply for this open position. Or, you know, it used to be that, you know, you had to have your manager sign off so they knew that you were applying. Well, guess what, staff? All the managers talk. Everybody knows when somebody applies for something else. So if that staff person is afraid to come to you, what kind of a scenario have you set up for them? So coaching all the way along, every conversation you have, at least on a monthly basis, should be, where do you see yourself going next and how can I help you get there? That's a very different discussion than saying to them, if they say, oh, I'm thinking about applying for that job, and you say, you better not leave me, right? You may be saying it in good fun, but to that employee, oof, that gets at their heart, right? All right, last but not least, as far as talking about how to create moments with our staff, making micro moments count. Now, I do a whole nother thing. Melissa had a hard time like reeling me in. I feel like a Macy's Thanksgiving Day balloon. Like I'm going to float in so many different directions. So I'm really trying to reel this in. I'm underdog. Anyway, so there are some micro moments that you can create with your staff, whether you're remote or whether you're in person. Eye contact is one of those ways. Eye contact is so powerful. If someone's on the phone, if someone's working with a member, just making eye contact and nodding that you see them, that's all you need to do to say, I see you. Literally, I see you. If you're walking down the hall, even if somebody is having a conversation with someone else, nodding and acknowledging that you're seeing them, as opposed to, I've got my head in my phone and I'm going to pretend I don't see anybody around. You see them. And there is some type of a vibe that you give off when you don't do that acknowledgement, right? Yes, thank you. It's building trust. Next up is manager involvement, making sure that when we are reaching out from HR, from leadership, from the C-level, that we are making sure that that manager has a way to know and understand, how does my staff want to be recognized? Do they want a big, huge welcome back? Everybody's here on Zoom with you. Welcome back. Or will that cause them to crawl back into their shell? In the case that I saw, this woman was so excited. She teared up. We were all crying because we're credit union people. We cry easily, right? And that's a good thing, I think. But how can we get the managers to be more involved with those day-to-day micro moments with our staff? A couple of ways that I like to coach managers to be more active is to actively seek out not only how do you like to be recognized, but what are the things that are happening in your life that you want to be recognized for, right? So I can do this so easily by writing a quick sticky note and leaving it on your desk as you walk by, right? Or I could use different colored sticky notes to illustrate different things. I could say, you know what? I overheard you with that member on the phone and you were a ray of sunshine. So I'm going to leave you with an orange sticky note on your desk. Nobody else needs to know what that means, but you and I know that an orange sticky note means you've got the attitude, you've got the energy, you've got the power to make a difference for whoever is on the other side of that line, right? If you have a new employee that you're training, you leave them a green sticky note when you're walking by, when you've overheard a conversation saying, you know what, you are really growing into this role. It may be that when you're having a virtual conversation with them, you change your background because you want to set the tone of, I am tickled pink with the job that you've been doing. Oh, this one has writing on it, but you get it. I'm using my sticky notes, right? The other thing that's so, so powerful. Oh, Marilyn, you have pre-made sticky notes. Send me some. I want one. I love that. Sending note cards, having a pack of note cards, doesn't matter what they have on them. Anything from flowers to butterflies to, I don't care, sunshine, I don't care. Blank cards that you can send home to someone. You've got a way to get their address, especially if you're in HR. Managers, you can get your staff's address without violating any rules, right? Send them a little note home, because guess what? How many people is that going to have an impact on? Not just me as an employee, but I'm going to show it to all my family. I might even take a picture of it and post it saying, look at how much my boss loves me and appreciates me. And that's what this is all about, is helping our staff feel appreciated so that they can continue to build relationships with our members. All right, keep those thoughts and ideas coming in the chat, and I'm going to turn it back over to Melissa.
Awesome. See, you didn't make the noise, so I wasn't sure what to do, but I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
It's because it's your slides. So you can stay on. If you keep staying on my slides, Melissa, I'm just going to keep talking, and it's going to be 2:30, and people will be like, wait a minute, I thought this was half an hour.
It's good. I have to say, I love all of this feedback too. Like, my background is as a classroom teacher. So some of these kinds of things that I would do in teacher workshops or with my students as well too, we're very cautious about like the point of like nonverbal and safety. Like, totally agree. We don't necessarily walk around patting people on the back. Like, you got to be careful about touching people unnecessarily, of course, and any of those kinds of things, especially right now. But any of those nonverbal, 100% agree. So the question is to like, agree, these are all great ideas. What are we going to do about them? The question is, well, what is your level of commitment? What's your plan? What are you going to put in place to make sure that these things are actually happening? Because we know, we're going to use that strand idea as well too. There are all kinds of things that happen in the life cycle of an organization, like from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. You're talking about, different quarters, you're talking about different budgets, you're talking about all of these different pieces are happening. Some things that make sense at the beginning of the year don't make sense at the end of the year. How are you keeping track of all of these pieces that happen organizationally? Fine, same for everybody. Teams, it does matter. You talk to a sales team member versus somebody else on a different team at the end of the month, they're going to have a different kind of conversation. The employee journey, meaning my first day, my 3-month anniversary, all of those things, as well as all of these life events. That's a lot of different strands to keep track of. And if we say all of these moments matter, like I think we all agree that these moments do matter. We want to be there and celebrate for people, but it can also be a challenge to keep track of all of those moving parts. So we have two approaches. We have the systematic approach, which is I'm going to check in all the time. I'm going to do those weekly, daily pulse checks. I'm going to do deep employee engagement studies. Great. Like that is good. That's about that deep level for everybody. You never know what's going to come up on any of those pieces. People are going to share with you when you have that ongoing conversation. People are more likely to share with you, hey, this is something that's going on, good or bad. You're more likely to find out if you're doing that regular outreach. The touch point check-in, again, all of those strands. These are things that we often see integrated with like your nice HRIS or any other CRM type tool that you're using, help you to keep on track with some of that automation. So the automation is absolutely a good process. It's, doesn't mean that it has to be a super in-depth questionnaire or pulse check. It can be as simple as something like this. How's it going? If someone says, amazing, I just have a new niece or something like that, who knows? Like you don't walk around asking people, by the way, do you have any new family member? That's not a conversation that normally comes up. But if you ask people that open question, how's it going? We often ask this. We do a pulse check here every other week for the same reason. We just want to check in and see how things are going overall. Yes, it's a systematic approach. We can track those trends, but we also get that open-ended response of what else is going on. So systems are good. Yes, I agree once we get those in place. But there's also that informal approach. We know some of those things don't come through normal channels. We don't have on the schedule like, oh, I see that you're expecting to have, a crown. Like, okay, well, if it's this crown, you probably know about the coronation in advance, but if it's the dental kind, you probably don't know about it. So checking in with people to find out what's going on, letting people give that feedback, but also another big piece of it is that peer recognition as well too. Knowing like, okay, I'm in HR, doesn't mean the sole responsibility of looking out for people or taking care of encouraging each other people. That is very funny. Encouraging people. It's not just on me because I'm in HR or because I'm someone's manager. It's something that we all see. We all see that kind of opportunity from that more organic approach, right? Like we know that if we set up those channels, so we do here, for example, like this landing page, here's the menu, drop me a note. This is something, hey, I just wanted to give a shout out to so-and-so. These are things that we celebrate here too. We've mentioned earlier, service, values. What are the core things that you want to celebrate as an organization? Encouraging the recognition of those things, because those moments that matter, we don't see them all. Like I don't see them from all of my colleagues. We know that, however, those are things that maybe just one other person noticed, or I was on a call with you, or I saw how you interacted with that person. Awesome job. And so we love to do this. So we do have an employee internal newsletter, so we can do some of that shout out, like, hey, celebrating, weddings, work anniversary. Work anniversary is a big one. And especially if you know that that's something that's, you are obviously working on employee engagement and retention. You want to celebrate those people who are there with you, building that up. It's not something like, oh, you've been here 20 minutes. Great job. That's a kind of scary impression. But when you celebrate people who've been there for a couple of years, those are major milestones, and you can see the trends in your own organization. People are here who are here with you 6 months or 8 months, or depending on the roles, some of those roles, that's a huge accomplishment. Absolutely. So having all of those pieces in place, letting people know, you can always share feedback. You can share it anonymously if you want to as well too. There's sometimes people want to say like, okay, I don't send in feedback that says Melissa did a really good job on that webinar, but sometimes it feels a little bit uncomfortable to say, hey, Angela, you're really cool. Like Angela and I do not feel uncomfortable with that. That's totally fine, but exactly right. She's already prepared. You have all the swag. I'm very impressed. But so these pieces, bringing all these pieces together, making sure that both the systematic approach in place, but also encouraging that organic, knowing that at any moment, people are going to recognize those moments. Either they're going to share with you something about their own experience, personally or professionally, or it's quite possible that they'll know something about someone else's experience. And so we love to be able to hear that. We love to be able to share that. Again, we talked about earlier, what's the appropriate forum? Like if there's something that you are out of the office for that you don't really want people to know about, be respectful of that, obviously. But if it's something like, oh, you just got married? That's amazing. This is good news, right? Like, can I tell people, or is that, you don't want to make people uncomfortable celebrating too much. But we know that all of those pieces come together, all of those tangles, that's what creates culture. So ideally, ta-da, this bright idea of all of these piles, all of these different strands. Of course, a systematic approach is a good idea, but also, of course, an organic approach is a good idea. So if you have note cards, pulse checks, whatever it is that you're doing, making sure that you have that in mind and knowing that you're empowering the rest of your team to be able to celebrate those as well. So it's not just like we're all looking to this one person who's in charge of, being nice. Like our fairy godmother is just the one who's going to come around and say like, and you did a good job, and you did a good job, and you did a good job. Recognition is one of the most important things that we see over and over again in all of the employee engagement studies that we see, that people don't necessarily feel that they're seen. And like the idea of literal eye contact is extremely important, especially in this relatively virtual world we live in, right? And so they're like, I see you. It's kind of a weird thing to say. It seems a little bit intense, but I see you is absolutely the thing that we want to say. So what I would say here on this one is, we see you. Celebrate this moment. This is a moment that matters as well for you, that you have taken the time. It sounds a little bit funny, like you were lucky enough to come hang out with us, but I feel lucky to be able to have spent this time with Angela talking about this topic. And we wanted to pause and just absolutely celebrate the fact that you prioritized this idea and joined us today. I don't know if you would want to eat that. That is a little bit too beautiful to eat, but
only if you fold it in half so that you make a frosting sandwich. Not fold it in half, you take the top off and anyway.
Yeah.
Melissa, there's a question in the chat from my friend Jenny Hoyle. Mm-hmm. How do we celebrate some of those boots on the ground observations in this remote environment when we're not always hearing or observing the member interactions? Would love to hear some suggestions on this, as it's so important to employee growth, engagement, and relationship building with their supervisors.
Is this a question for me, or you're just telling me?
For you, I'm putting it to you. So, and to anyone too. I mean, this is an all hands on deck. If you have ideas on how to celebrate and do those observations when we're remote.
Yeah. So for us, like definitely, like I said, figuring out those ideas of how do we make sure those channels are open, like that menu that I showed on this other slide here is like, that is something, I'll just go back here, not that it's so many slides away. There's something, so go connect in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen too. Like this is something that's on our HR site. Like we have our own HR site. People always have that opportunity to be able to share feedback, to say, you know what, I noticed we should have a training, or I noticed that somebody did a really nice job, or I noticed all of those kinds of things. That's sort of like, yeah, eyes on you kind of thing, is that we've got the opportunity all the time to be able to sort of report that. From the proactive sense, I think a lot of it comes from the regular engagements and the sort of the structure of those regular engagements that we have with our team members as well too. Asking the right questions, asking the right questions in those one-on-ones. What's going on? What's happening? Making those informal and comfortable enough that people feel like it's okay to say something like, also, I'm moving this weekend. Like, oh, that's exciting. Like there's a lot of really exciting things that are happening in people's lives. And we don't always know if we only focus on, what do you need from me? What do I need from you? If we make those interactions transactional, we're less likely to encounter sort of those sort of good to know, like, conversations and opportunities. So I think that to me, it's like that ongoing, wide open, always on feedback from anybody there, but also the interactions that we have with each other, especially managers and people in HR, encouraging that informal style of conversation as well.
One of the things that I've seen work really well, especially in the remote environment, even though you can't be there to do those observations. And I had a remote team for, I don't know, probably 13 years. My team was all remote. And I always said, invite me to your calls. I want to hear, I want to sit in on your calls. And it was very rare that they would actually invite me. And so I had to rely a lot on other means to get that feedback. But one of the things that we employed with our call center was giving each call center rep a notebook, a spiral notebook. And they then were asked to keep a journal, basically, where they would say one good thing that they observed somebody else do that day, and one good thing that they felt they did that day. And if they had something they wanted to learn, they could jot that down as well. Because I think what tends to happen, and what we found was typically in that high transaction environment, like a call center, I answer the phone, I take care of it. I answer the phone, I take care of it. And so no single transaction really stands out to me. Even if I leave that conversation feeling really good, I'm on to the next thing. And then the problems tend to stand out more than those solutions and those happy members and happy coworkers. So if you can get them to just jot down every day a good thing that they saw somebody else do, a good thing that they themselves did, it gives you a way to have a better interaction and a little bit of a fly on the wall kind of observation, where if they say to you, you know what, when Mrs. Jones left the other day, she was so excited that we were able to get her out of her old car and get her a new one. She never thought she'd be able to do that, and she was so pleased. You could then push on that a little bit more, press for some specifics and get additional information about, well, what did you say? How were you able to make that loan work? What were the things that really made a difference to her regarding the relationship that we have with her? So getting some specifics from them when you get that little tip of the iceberg creates a different dialogue. It moves away from the punitive, let's talk about what isn't going well and where you're not meeting your goals. Not that anybody does that on this call. And it moves more toward, let's focus on what you did well. When you're training little kids, when you're training puppies, it's all about treating them for the good things, right? You took one step, woohoo, not you fell down 6 times, right? I mean, people are like ecstatic about you taking your first steps. Now I'm ecstatic when I can get up and I don't groan. But when you celebrate those things when someone's starting off, that makes a lot of sense for us. But somehow we forget to celebrate those little successes the more somebody gets into their job. So I'm going to, I've been on, what's that called? Clubhouse. I've been on Clubhouse a lot. And I don't know if anybody's been on it yet, but when you are finished speaking, you say, I'm Angela and I'm finished. So I almost said, I'm Angela and I'm finished. I'm like, I don't need to do that here. But
recognize you. Yeah, no. And I think the notes here that we're seeing, for example, that idea of like, it is easier sometimes to recognize others than to recognize yourself. It sounds, we're sort of trained to be modest, don't be self-serving, don't be egotistical. And so sometimes those things aren't appreciated. So I agree, the idea of a journal, like I have often in the past had people keep an onboarding journal, that kind of thing. Like, here's what my experience has been, here's what I need. We also do, as a practice, every week we have our Friday forum. It is a virtual, especially many of our colleagues I've never met before in real life. And they're doing great.
Yeah, this isn't real life, right, Melissa?
Real life, so
I've never met you in real life.
People say, "Oh, let's take this offline." They also mean online somewhere else, though. So
right, different kind of line.
So we have a end of the week like wrap up conversation with the whole team, which is what was good for you this week, what was a challenge this week, what are we looking forward to, and that's sometimes where we find like who knows what's been going on. So many different things are happening within the organization and in those different silos that you could be again the only person on that call, but given that prompt, like, was there something good? And whether it's personal or professional, like we all want to celebrate those kinds of things. We all want to know what's been going on, or we think, that's what was going on. I had no idea about. So there's a lot of cool stuff. Yeah.
Doing sales and service training and coaching for years, like I have been, I'm really young. I know I've got the touch up my appearance all the way slid to the end on Zoom right now. So you can't tell how old I am, but anyway, observations with staff. I'm like, where was I? Wow, bring it back in, Angela. Did you see me go on a little vacation there for a minute?
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah.
Right? Ring the bell for me. So when you do observations with staff and you say to them what went well about that transaction, they focus so much on, oh, why didn't I say this? Oh, I can't believe I said that. No wonder they left frustrated because I did this bad and I did that bad. So changing that tune and making sure that they know you're always going to start off with what went well gets them more comfortable with saying, you know what, I am going to brag on myself.
Absolutely. I love these notes that we're seeing too. And Stephen, I don't know if there's any other questions that were coming in, but good, like great stuff. And I think Teachers, like that's my background as well too. I think teachers have a lot of that because it's very personal over and over time, that interaction that you have with students. You might be in your own little world, no one else sees it, but giving that feedback to your students is sort of that classroom management kind of thing. You can't always be like, and you're in trouble and you're in trouble. That interaction. So we've talked a little bit about, when Angela and I were chatting about this too, we talk about how frequently are you having those interactions with different members of your team, different members of, like for me, for my students, it would be, you know, on the ideal day, right? Like I have the chart of all of the students and I'm check, check, check. I've spoken to each of these students. I've called on them each once. We often have people in our teams that, especially in a remote level, are a little bit, you know, so wallflower kind of thing. I don't that idea that like we might not ever hear from them unless we make that a special effort to check in, see what's going on. You know, ideally, hopefully there are some good things going on, but we never want to be in that situation where we find out that that person has faded so far that we don't have the opportunity to bring them back in. And that is especially challenging right now. That's those initial challenges that we start with. A lot of those are causing that disengagement. And it's much harder to pull people back once they've sort of faded, you know, out of close touch at this point, where we just want to see that happen. We want to make those connections before it's too late.
Well, and for me, you know, hearing that statistic, the Gallup survey that says 64% of our staff are actively disengaged, that's heartbreaking for me.
Big number. Yeah.
That is heartbreaking. That's, you know, almost 3/4. we said hashtag math is hard. It's a lot. It's a lot, right? So yeah, and make a list of all your staff and then cross 3/4 of them off because they're disengaged. That is literally what we're talking about here. Yes, math is hard, Jenny. Thank you.
I saw Nancy's comment from earlier too of only 70%. I thought it'd be closer to 90 for that worst year of your life. It means that some people are doing okay. Some people are getting by. They're coping. I don't think anyone's thinking like, this is great. There's 0 people who are thinking that we could put up that statistic without a study. 0 people think this is great, but some people some people are coping better than others. And we want to be able to learn from the people who are handling it well or handling it better so we can use those strategies to grow. So Angela, you're clearly one of those people who is handling it well. So I appreciate being able to connect with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? Not every day is amazing. Not every day is amazing, but there are more amazing days than not these days. And so I'm counting myself lucky.
That is right.
I'm literally, as soon as we hang up the phone, I'm getting in the car to go get my first COVID vaccine.
Oh,
so I mean,
I'm sorry.
What could be better than that?
Let me go back to, there we go.
Yeah, right?
Always something to celebrate.
Exactly. And I'm kind of playing it by the, there's light at the end of the tunnel, my friend Nancy. I'm playing it by the European rules, or in England where 1 dose is all you need and you're fine. No, that's not true. But I'm going to feel such a sense of relief after 1 dose. I'm really excited to get a shot in the arm.
That is awesome. Yeah, very rare. Stephen, is there anything else that's come in that we need to address before we wrap up? Otherwise, we'll keep going.
Nope. I think we've covered everything. We've covered the couple questions that we had in that Q&A space. So that was good. I think this was a really good conversation. So it's about time for us to wrap up. I just want to say thank you, first of all, to both our speakers, Melissa and Angela. We really appreciated having you here today and having you come and speak to us. And also to say thank you for all of our attendees. We're glad that you gave us some time this afternoon to come hear us talk about employee experience and the way that we can make it better for our employees. We'll be reaching out with this webinar recording in the next day or two. And until then, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.